The rain in Seattle doesn't just fall, it bleeds into the pavement, a relentless gray hum that mirrors the slow, suffocating dissolution of everything you thought was permanent. And that Tuesday evening, as the wipers on my Ford Explorer slapped rhythmically against the windshield, I had no inkling that the world I had spent 7 years building with Sarah was about to vanish into thin air. I had left the office early because a localized power outage in downtown Bellevue had knocked out our servers, giving me a rare, unexpected 3-hour head start on the weekend. A pocket of time I foolishly imagined filling with a surprise takeout dinner from that little artisanal Thai place she loved near Capitol Hill. Maybe a bottle of that overpriced Pinot Noir we bought on our anniversary in Oregon. But the moment I turned our mid-century modern front door key in the lock of our quiet Sammamish home, an eerie, heavy stillness greeted me that instantly made the hairs on my arms stand up. The house smelled faintly of expensive sandalwood cologne, a sharp, aggressive scent that was distinctly not mine. And as I set my keys down on the entryway console, noticing her designer trench coat thrown carelessly over the banister instead of hung in the closet, a cold, instinctual dread coiled tightly in my gut. I walked past the kitchen where 2 half-empty crystal wine glasses sat on the quartz island next to an open bottle of vintage Cabernet, the deep red liquid staining the rims like fresh wounds, and my feet began to move of their own accord toward the staircase, each step feeling heavier, more surreal, as if the oxygen in our open-concept home was rapidly thinning. The house was supposed to be empty. Sarah had texted me barely an hour prior, claiming she was trapped in a grueling quarterly budget review with the executive board, complaining about how her demanding boss, David, was micromanaging every single spreadsheet. Yet as I reached the upper landing, the muffled sound of low laughter and unmistakable intimate whispers drifted from behind our partially open bedroom door, shattering the quiet afternoon with the force of a sledgehammer. I stood frozen in the hallway, the world tilting violently on its axis, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird as I pushed the door open just an inch further, my eyes registering a scene that instantly scorched itself into my retinas. Sarah, my wife, the woman who had sworn her life to me in front of everyone we loved, was tangled in our Egyptian cotton sheets with David, the wealthy, arrogant senior vice president she always claimed to despise, his expensive tailored suit jacket discarded on our velvet armchair, her laughter dying instantly in her throat as her eyes locked onto mine through the gap in the door. The transition from blind, suffocating shock to a terrifyingly absolute freezing clarity happened in the span of a single heartbeat. I didn't yell, I didn't throw my fist through the drywall, and I didn't demand the frantic, stuttering explanations that immediately began pouring out of her mouth as she scrambled away from him, clutching the duvet to her chest with trembling hands while David, suddenly looking pathetic and stripped of his corporate authority, fumbled on the floor for his silk tie and dress shirt. "Mark, oh my God, Mark, please! It's not what it looks like. He was dropping off files and things got out of hand. Please just let me explain. Don't look at me like that," she sobbed, her voice cracking with a desperate panic that felt entirely alien to the composed corporate woman I loved. But as I looked at her flushed face and the chaotic disarray of our marriage bed, I felt absolutely nothing but a vast, echoing vacuum where my devotion used to reside. David tried to speak, clearing his throat to assume a posture of awkward corporate diplomacy, saying, "Look, man, let's just calm down and talk about this rationally like adults." But I merely looked through him as if he were made of cheap glass, my gaze shifting back to Sarah with a detachment so cold it seemed to physically startle her, cutting off her torrent of excuses mid-sentence. In that single, unyielding moment of realization, I saw the past 3 years of our marriage with terrifyingly perfect hindsight. The sudden influx of late-night emergency strategy meetings, the password changes on her phone, the expensive new wardrobe she claimed was for professional branding, and the way she had gradually stopped looking me in the eyes when we toasted to our future, all of it clicking together like pieces of a sickening puzzle that I'd been too trusting, too American dream-obsessed to acknowledge. I realized that the woman standing before me wasn't the girl I married in a sun-drenched vineyard in Napa Valley. She was a stranger who had casually traded our history, our vows, and my sanity for a taste of corporate ladder validation and a wealthy man's attention, and the sheer cheapness of her betrayal cured me of my grief before it could even begin. Without uttering a single syllable, without giving them the satisfaction of a scene, a scream, or a tear, I turned around on my heel and walked down the stairs, my boots striking the hardwood with a steady, unhurried rhythm that signaled an absolute, irreversible ending. Sarah came sprinting down after me, bare feet slapping against the wood, her hair disheveled and her voice rising to a shrill, hysterical pitch as she pleaded, "Mark, stop, please talk to me. You can't just walk out like this. We can go to therapy, we can fix this. I love you, please don't do this to us." Her hands reaching out to grab the sleeve of my jacket, but I pulled my arm away with a quick clinical efficiency that was more brutal than any physical blow could ever be. I walked into our walk-in closet in the mudroom, grabbed my leather duffel bag, and with methodical, calm precision began packing only the essentials. KO laptop, my passport, my birth certificate, a week's worth of clothes, and the watch my father gave me, completely ignoring the way she hovered over my shoulder, weeping, hyperventilating, and offering a dizzying cocktail of apologies, deflections, and bargaining. "It was just a mistake, Mark. A stupid, meaningless mistake. David means nothing to me. It's just the stress of the promotion. Please don't throw away 7 years over one lapse in judgment," she begged, her face pale and stained with mascara. But the utter delusion of calling a calculated months-long affair a lapse in judgment only solidified the titanium wall that had dropped in my mind, making me realize that the marriage hadn't just died today. It had been dead for a very long time, and I had merely been guarding a corpse. When David finally came down the stairs, fully dressed but looking utterly humiliated, attempting to sneak past us to reach the front door, I didn't even look up from zipping my bag, merely stepping aside to give him a wide berth as if he were a pile of roadside debris, watching dispassionately as he scurried out into the Seattle rain, leaving the woman he had ruined a life with to face the consequences alone. Turning back to Sarah, who was now sinking onto the bottom step of the staircase, her head buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking violently as the reality of her total ruin began to settle into her bones, I finally spoke, my voice devoid of anger, devoid of sorrow, carrying only the flat, crushing weight of a final verdict. "The house is yours until the lawyers sell it. Do not call me, do not text me, and have your attorney contact mine by Friday morning." She looked up, her eyes wide with a horrified understanding that there would be no grand reconciliation scene, no tears, no dramatic shouting matches that she could manipulate or de-escalate, because I had already checked out, emotionally and spiritually, leaving nothing behind but a ghost of the man who used to worship her. I picked up my duffel bag, walked out the front door into the cool, damp Pacific Northwest evening, and closed the door behind me with a soft, definitive click that echoed through the quiet suburban street like a gunshot, my chest suddenly expanding with a strange, sharp oxygen that felt like freedom. As I started the engine of my truck and pulled out of the driveway, catching a final glimpse of her pale face watching me from the living room window through the downpour, I didn't feel the burning rage of a betrayed husband. I felt the profound, unshakable peace of a man who had just looked into the abyss, seen the truth, and chosen to walk away into the rain, leaving the wreckage entirely in her hands, ready to rebuild my life from scratch on a foundation made of nothing but absolute truth.